Hey everybody, before we get started with today's video on Jesperi Kotkaniemi, do me a big favor and hit that subscribe button. We're really trying to grow this channel and get it out to more Montreal Canadiens fans around the world. Last Saturday was a very interesting one for Marc Bergevin and the Montreal Canadiens because the Carolina Hurricanes tendered an offer sheet to Jesperi Kotkaniemi and signed him to a one-year deal worth $6.1 million per season. The compensation for that offer sheet is one first-round pick and one third-round pick from the Carolina Hurricanes next season in the 2022 NHL Draft. So now the decision needs to be made by this Saturday whether or not the Montreal Canadiens will decide to match this offer sheet or take the compensation from the Carolina Hurricanes. Now there's a lot to unpack here with this offer sheet, which likely stems from the fact that the Montreal Canadiens offer sheet star forward Sebastian Aho of the Carolina Hurricanes just 2 years ago. But there's so much to unpack here in terms of whether the Montreal Canadiens should match this offer sheet, and it's really hard to say. There's a lot of people right now that are 50-50 on this decision, and I'm kind of in that ballpark right now. But from everything that we're hearing, it seems as though the Canadiens are likely to not match this offer sheet for Jesperi Kotkaniemi and let him go to the Carolina Hurricanes and take the compensation. A lot of those reports stem from Eric Engels, who is a beat reporter for the Montreal Canadiens for Sportsnet, and Elliot Friedman, who is a reporter for Sportsnet as well. But what it really comes down to is whether the Montreal Canadiens still see the potential of Jesperi Kotkaniemi, or they think he's already peaked as that third-line center in the NHL. I really wonder if the Montreal Canadiens have some regrets about whether or not they started Jesperi Kotkaniemi a little bit too early in the National Hockey League. We know that at the young age of 18, Jesperi Kotkaniemi had a very strong training camp for the Montreal Canadiens, but there still needs to be questions about whether they did the right thing in terms of his development, because there has been so many peaks and valleys. We've seen Jesperi Kotkaniemi go on runs for 10 games or more with this Montreal Canadiens team, but there's been a lot of dry spells in there as well, and I think a lot of that has to do with how they manage his development. And let's be honest, this was a bit of a reach at third overall. Despite him being a very talented player, he was likely to go between 7 and 12 in the NHL entry draft. Arizona was going to take Jesperi Kotkaniemi in that draft if the Montreal Canadiens didn't, and I think they felt a lot of pressure to take that center because Marc Bergevin has often said centers don't grow on trees and you can't get them via trade, so you have to draft them. And I think that the Montreal Canadiens felt a lot of pressure in that draft to pick a center, but the right pick might have been somewhere else in that draft, whether it was Brady Tkachuk or Quinn Hughes. Hindsight is obviously 2020, but where would the Montreal Canadiens be right now if they had selected someone different than Jesperi Kotkaniemi? Something else that needs to be added to the equation here is that it's not just $6.1 million for this season, because he's guaranteed to get that as a qualifying offer next season. In arbitration, he could go down to $5.1 million, around that kind of a range, but it's still a lot of money when there's still a lot of unknowns for this young player. There is no doubt that Marc Bergevin is doing his due diligence and shopping around those compensation picks that the Montreal Canadiens would receive if they decide not to match. And the number one target appears to be Christian Dvorak of the Arizona Coyotes. So right now, if the Montreal Canadiens decided to let Jesperi Kotkaniemi walk and then they acquired Christian Dvorak via trade, they might be a better team at this current time, but they also have to weigh whether or not Jesperi Kotkaniemi's career trajectory is bigger than that of Christian Dvorak, because we know what Dvorak is at the NHL level right now, and he's kind of that steady $4 million player, and you have some consistency and term in his contract that really adds some stabilization to the Montreal Canadiens. But the question is, do the Montreal Canadiens want to rely on the potential that is still raw of Jesperi Kotkaniemi, or do they allow the security of a player like Christian Dvorak to potentially add to their club right now down the middle? Listen, I like Jesperi Kotkaniemi as much as the next person, but there's a realistic chance right now that we know exactly the type of player that he's going to be in the National Hockey League. And if he is what he is, then the Montreal Canadiens would be wise to accept the first and the third from the Carolina Hurricanes and move on from this player. That's it for me today from Cook's Corner. As always, let me know in the comment section down below whether or not you think the Montreal Canadiens should decide to match the Carolina Hurricanes offer sheet. And if they don't, who should they look at via trade to acquire to really bolster their depth down the middle of the ice? I'm Zach Cook. We'll see you later.